Martin sat across from me in our office, the one we'd shared for 25 years, and looked me straight in the eye as he lied. "Thomas, you're getting old. Your memory isn't what it was. Those invoices are legitimate. I've explained this 3 times already." I placed the stack of papers on the desk between us. Purchase orders, invoices, payment records, all for Riverside Building Supply, a vendor I'd never heard of despite running this construction company for 45 years. $347,000 paid to this company over the past 18 months for materials we'd supposedly used on projects I'd personally supervised. "Show me one load of lumber from Riverside that arrived on any of our job sites," I said calmly. "Just one delivery." Martin's jaw tightened. "I don't keep photographs of every delivery truck that shows up. Neither do you. This is ridiculous, Thomas. Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking you to explain these invoices, because I've checked with every foreman we have. None of them remember receiving materials from this supplier. And when I called the address on their invoices, it's a mailbox rental store in Hartford. So maybe they went out of business. Maybe the foreman forgot. We run $1 million operation here, Thomas. I can't account for every detail from 18 months ago." I'd known Martin for 40 years. We'd met on a construction site in 1985, both of us young men working as framers, carrying lumber in the July heat and dreaming about running our own companies someday. We'd become best friends, golf partners. Our families had vacationed together. I'd been best man at his second wedding after his divorce. He'd helped me through my wife Sarah's death from breast cancer 6 years ago. And now he was lying to my face about stealing nearly $1 million from our company. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 68 years old. I've spent 45 years in the construction business, starting as a laborer at age 23 and building my way up to owning Brennan and Sullivan Construction, a company that at its peak employed 42 people and grossed $4 million annually. I've built shopping centers, apartment complexes, schools, and office buildings across Connecticut and western Massachusetts. I'm not a sophisticated man. I didn't go to college. I learned construction by doing it, by watching skilled tradesmen, by making mistakes and fixing them. But one thing I learned early in my career: keep records. Document everything. Because if you can't prove what you built, what you spent, or what you were paid, you're going to lose money. And in construction, losing money means going out of business. So for 45 years, I've kept meticulous records. Paper records in the early days, now mostly digital, but with paper backups because I'm old-fashioned and don't fully trust computers. Every invoice, every purchase order, every payroll record, every contract, filed, labeled, and stored. Martin knew this about me. We'd been partners for 25 years. He'd seen my filing system, teased me about it sometimes. "Thomas, you keep better records than the IRS," he'd joke. "You could probably tell me what we paid for drywall screws in 1998. What Martin didn't know was that I kept duplicate records, a complete second set of files that I maintained separately from our official company records. A habit I'd developed in my early days as an independent contractor after a client had claimed I'd never completed work I absolutely had done. I'd had no way to prove otherwise because I'd only kept one set of records and they'd somehow disappeared from the job site. That lesson cost me $12,000 in the 1980s. I never forgot it. So I started keeping duplicates, every invoice copied, every purchase order duplicated, every contract photocopied and stored separately. When computers became standard, I printed backup copies of digital records and stored them at home in my garage in filing cabinets that only I accessed. Martin didn't know about this system. Nobody did except Sarah, and she'd passed away 6 years ago. To everyone else, including Martin, I was just a thorough record keeper who maintained the company files properly. Martin and I had formed our partnership in 2000. I'd been running Brennan Construction for 12 years at that point, building a solid reputation but struggling to grow beyond a certain size. Martin had been working as a project manager for a larger firm but wanted to own part of a company rather than just manage projects for someone else. We'd stayed friends through the years, golfing regularly, having beers after work, attending each other's kids' graduations. "We should partner up," Martin had said one evening at the bar after a round of golf. "You've got the reputation and the client relationships. I've got the project management skills and the connections with subcontractors. We could double your business in 3 years." He'd been right. Brennan and Sullivan construction grew rapidly. Martin was excellent at bidding projects, managing schedules, and keeping crews productive. I focused on client relationships, quality control, and the financial side. We complemented each other well. By 2010, we were grossing over $4 million annually and employed more than 40 people. Our partnership agreement was simple: 50-50 split of profits, equal authority over business decisions, both of us drawing the same salary. We'd shaken hands on it in 2000 and never had a serious disagreement about money or management in 25 years. Until 3 months ago, when I'd started noticing irregularities in our accounts. It began with a casual observation. I was reviewing our quarterly financials in preparation for our accountant's visit, and I noticed our materials costs were higher than expected. Not dramatically higher, but enough to catch my attention. Our profit margin had dropped from 22% to 19% over the past 2 years. That might not sound like much, but on $4 million in revenue, that's $120,000 in missing profit. I mentioned it to Martin. Our materials costs are running high. Are we getting good prices from our suppliers? Prices are up everywhere, Martin had said. Lumber, drywall, concrete. Everything's more expensive since the pandemic. You know that. But we should be getting volume discounts. We're buying enough material to negotiate better rates. I'll look into it, Martin had promised. But 2 weeks later, he hadn't mentioned it again. So I started digging deeper into the records. And that's when I found the invoices from Riverside Building Supply. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in materials supposedly purchased from this company I'd never heard of. Materials for projects I'd personally supervised, projects where I knew exactly what materials we'd used because I'd been on site watching crews install them. I'd called the phone number on the invoices. Disconnected. I'd driven to the address listed, a mailbox rental location in a strip mall. I'd searched Connecticut's business registration database. No company named Riverside Building Supply was currently registered, and the only historical listing had been dissolved in 2018, 2 years before these invoices began appearing in our accounts. Riverside Building Supply didn't exist. The invoices were fake, and someone was stealing money from our company through fraudulent billing. That someone had to be Martin. He was the only other person with full access to our accounting system. He approved invoices, signed checks, and managed vendor relationships. I handled client billing and receivables, but Martin handled payables and vendor management. I'd spent the past 3 months reconstructing our financial records, comparing official company files against my duplicate records stored at home. The scope of the fraud was staggering. Riverside Building Supply was just the largest fake vendor. There were others: Apex Materials, Summit Hardware, Northeast Equipment Rental, all fake companies, all with invoices that had been entered into our accounting system and paid from our business account. $890,000. That's what my analysis showed. Nearly $900,000 stolen over 5 years through fake invoices, payments to non-existent vendors, and fraudulent expense reports. My best friend of 40 years had been systematically robbing me for 5 years. I'd hired a forensic accountant to verify my findings. Janet Morrison, a woman in her early 50s who specialized in fraud investigation and had worked with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit before going private. She'd spent 2 weeks analyzing our records, cross-referencing bank statements, tracing payment destinations, and documenting the paper trail. Her report confirmed everything I'd suspected and revealed details I hadn't known. The payments to fake vendors had been deposited into accounts Martin controlled. The money had then been moved through a series of transfers designed to obscure the trail, but Janet had followed it. Some of the money had gone to personal expenses, a luxury condo in Miami that Martin rented for $4,200 per month, a Porsche Cayenne registered in Martin's name, casino gambling losses totaling more than $180,000 at Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods. Martin had a gambling problem I'd never suspected, and he'd been feeding that addiction with money stolen from our company. The evidence is overwhelming, Janet had told me in her office 2 weeks ago. Mr. Sullivan has committed wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. These are federal crimes. I strongly recommend you contact law enforcement immediately and file a criminal complaint. I'd sat in her office, looking at the 147-page report she'd prepared, feeling something I'd rarely felt in 45 years of construction work. Complete devastation. Not anger, not rage, just a profound sense of loss. My best friend had betrayed me for money. 40 years of friendship meant nothing compared to his gambling addiction and his desire for a luxury lifestyle he couldn't afford. But beneath that devastation, something else was forming. A cold, focused determination. Martin had stolen from me. He'd lied to me. He'd betrayed our partnership and our friendship. And he'd done it systematically for 5 years, thinking I'd never notice. He'd been wrong about that. And he was about to discover just how wrong. I'd spent the past 2 weeks preparing. I'd consulted with a criminal attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. I'd met with FBI agents from the Financial Crimes Division. I'd organized my duplicate records and Janet's forensic report into a comprehensive evidence package that documented every fraudulent transaction. And this morning, I'd told Martin we needed to talk about some irregularities I'd found in our accounts. Now we sat in our office, the office we'd shared for 25 years, and Martin looked at me with an expression mixing annoyance and something else. Fear, maybe. He knew I'd found something. He just didn't know how much. "Let me understand what you're suggesting," Martin said slowly. "You think I created fake vendors and paid them from our company account? Thomas, that's insane. Why would I do that? I own half this company. I'd be stealing from myself." "You'd be stealing from both of us," I said. "But you'd get your half of the stolen money back through profit distributions. So effectively, you'd be stealing half from me and half from the company. Then, you'd split whatever remained with me at year end. It's actually a pretty clever scheme if you don't look too closely at the numbers." Martin's face reddened. "I'm not going to sit here and be accused of theft by someone who's clearly losing his edge. You want to audit the books? Fine. Hire an accountant. I've got nothing to hide." I already hired an accountant, a forensic accountant named Janet Morrison. She spent 2 weeks analyzing our records. Would you like to see her report? The color drained from Martin's face. "You hired a forensic accountant without telling me?" "I hired her 3 weeks ago when I realized something was very wrong with our financials. She's very thorough. She found all the fake vendors, all the fraudulent invoices. She traced where the money went, the Miami condo, the Porsche, the casino losses, all of it, Martin." Martin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this. You've clearly lost your mind, Thomas. 40 years of friendship and this is how you treat me. Hiring investigators behind my back, accusing me of fraud." "Sit down, Martin. I'm done with this conversation." "Sit down," I repeated, my voice harder now, "because we're not finished. Not even close." Martin hesitated, then slowly sat back down. He looked older suddenly, his face drawn and gray. "What do you want?" "I want you to tell me why." 40 years, Martin. 40 years we've been friends, 25 years as partners. Why?" "I didn't do anything. Don't lie to me anymore. I have documentation of every fraudulent invoice. I have bank records showing where the money went. I have photographs of the Miami condo you're renting, the Porsche you're driving, the casino transactions you've made. Janet Morrison has built a criminal case that could send you to federal prison for 20 years. So don't sit there and lie to me. Tell me why." The silence stretched between us. Outside our office window, I could hear the sounds of a construction site 3 blocks away. Hammering, power tools, the backup beeping of heavy equipment, the sounds of honest work being done by honest people, the sounds that had defined my entire adult life. "I needed the money," Martin finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For what? Gambling? A luxury condo you don't need?" "You don't understand the pressure, Thomas. Susan wanted a certain lifestyle. The kids' college tuition was crushing me, and yes, I gambled. I thought I could win it back, make it all work out. But it got out of control. So you stole from me. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. You stole nearly $900,000 over 5 years. When exactly were you planning to pay that back?" Martin put his head in his hands. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. It started small, just a few thousand here and there to cover some expenses. Then it got bigger and bigger, and I couldn't stop." "You're not a victim, Martin. You made deliberate choices. You created fake companies. You forged invoices. You stole money from our business account. Those were conscious decisions repeated hundreds of times over 5 years. What are you going to do? I looked at my best friend of 40 years and felt nothing but disappointment. I'm going to the police. Today. I'm filing a criminal complaint. The FBI is already aware of the situation. They're going to prosecute you for wire fraud and embezzlement. Thomas, please. Prison would destroy me. I'm 66 years old. Please, let's work something out. I'll sell everything. I'll pay you back. Please don't do this. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. Our friendship has to mean something. 40 years, Thomas. That has to count for something. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. 40 years of friendship, golf trips, family dinners, supporting each other through divorces and deaths and business struggles. All of it real, I'd thought. All of it meaningful. But Martin had thrown it away for money, for a condo and a car and gambling losses. He'd looked at 40 years of friendship and decided it was worth less than $890,000. You ended our friendship when you started stealing from me, I said without turning around. I'm not ending it now. You ended it 5 years ago. I'm just acknowledging what you already did. Please, Thomas. I turned to face him. Pack your personal items and leave. You're no longer welcome in this office or on any of our job sites. My attorney will be in touch about dissolving the partnership, and the FBI will be contacting you very soon about the criminal charges. That's all I have to say to you. Martin stood up slowly, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. He started to say something, then stopped. Then he walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me one final time. I'm sorry, Thomas. I really am sorry. So am I said. But sorry doesn't fix this. Martin left. I watched through the window as he walked to his Porsche, got in, and drove away. Then I sat down at my desk and called the attorney who'd been waiting for my call. Martin's been informed, I said when she answered. I'm ready to file the criminal complaint. I'll contact the FBI immediately. They'll want to interview you this afternoon if you're available. I'm available. I want this moving forward as quickly as possible. After hanging up, I sat in the office that suddenly felt much larger and emptier than it had an hour ago. 40 years of friendship, gone. 25 years of partnership, destroyed. A company we'd built together, now tainted by fraud and betrayal. But I felt no hesitation about what I was doing. Martin had made his choices. Now he'd face the consequences. That's how the world worked. That's how it had to work. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the duplicate records I'd been keeping for 45 years. The records Martin hadn't known existed. The records that would prove every fraudulent transaction he'd made. In construction, we have a saying, measure twice, cut once. It means be careful, be thorough, be precise, because mistakes in construction are expensive and sometimes impossible to fix. Martin had forgotten that principle. He'd measured once, cut badly, and now he was going to pay for that mistake. I spent the rest of the morning organizing documents for the FBI interview. Purchase orders, invoices, bank statements, Janet Morrison's forensic report, my own analysis comparing official records to my duplicates. Everything organized chronologically and by vendor. Everything documented and verified. At 2 o'clock, FBI Special Agent Richard Torres and his partner Jennifer Walsh arrived at my office. I spent 3 hours walking them through the evidence, explaining the construction business, describing how I'd discovered the fraud, and answering their questions about Martin's access and authority. Mr. Brennan, this is one of the most well-documented fraud cases I've seen, Agent Torres said when we finished. Your record-keeping made our job significantly easier. We'll be opening a formal investigation immediately. I expect we'll be filing charges within 60 days. What happens to Martin during that time? We'll interview him, likely with a search warrant for his financial records. We'll trace the money, identify any co-conspirators, and build our case. If he's smart, he'll get an attorney and cooperate, but based on this evidence, cooperation won't help him much. The case is very strong. After they left, I locked the office and drove home. The house was quiet when I arrived. I'd lived alone since Sarah died 6 years ago. The kids were grown and living in other states. It was just me now, rattling around in a 4-bedroom house filled with memories of a life that had seemed simpler and happier. I made dinner, watched the news, and went to bed at 10 o'clock like I did every night. I expected to lie awake thinking about Martin, about 40 years of friendship destroyed, about what came next, but I fell asleep almost immediately, and I slept soundly through the night, because I'd done the right thing. And when you've done the right thing, even if it's hard, even if it hurts, you can sleep. So far, Thomas discovered his business partner and best friend Martin had embezzled $890,000 over 5 years through fake vendors and fraudulent invoices. Using duplicate records Martin didn't know existed, Thomas hired forensic accountant Janet Morrison, who documented every fraudulent transaction. After confronting Martin and ending their 40-year friendship, Thomas contacted the FBI. Now, with agents Richard Torres and Jennifer Walsh investigating, the criminal case against Martin begins to build. The FBI moved faster than I expected. 4 days after my interview with agents Torres and Walsh, they executed search warrants on Martin's home, his Miami condo, and his vehicle. They seized computers, phones, financial records, and boxes of documents. Martin's attorney, a white-collar defense lawyer named Robert Hammond, tried to fight the warrants but had no legal basis to stop them. I learned about the searches from Agent Torres, who called me that evening. "We found evidence supporting everything in your documentation, Mr. Brennan. Bank statements showing the deposits, emails between Sullivan and the mailbox rental company setting up fake business addresses, even a spreadsheet on his computer tracking the fraudulent invoices. He kept records of his own fraud." "Why would he document his crimes?" I asked. Criminals are often remarkably stupid about record keeping. They want to track what they're stealing, make sure they're getting the right amounts. Then those records become the evidence that convicts them. In Sullivan's case, his spreadsheet matches your forensic accountant's findings almost exactly. He stole $893,000. Your accountant calculated $890,000. The difference is rounding errors. What happens next? We're building the case for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I expect formal charges within 3 to 4 weeks. Wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Will he take a plea deal? Most defendants do. Going to trial with evidence this strong would be suicidal. His attorney will probably negotiate for a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation and full restitution. But even with a plea deal, he's going to prison. The question is whether it's 5 years or 15. After hanging up with Torres, I sat in my living room thinking about Martin in prison, 66 years old, sent to federal prison for embezzlement, his reputation destroyed, his family humiliated, his future erased. All because he'd decided gambling and luxury were more important than integrity. Part of me still couldn't believe it. 40 years I'd known this man. I'd trusted him with my business, my friendship, my company, and he'd been stealing from me for 5 years while smiling to my face, playing golf with me, telling me stories about his grandchildren. But the evidence was irrefutable. The fake invoices, the bank deposits, the Miami condo, the casino losses, the spreadsheet tracking his thefts. Martin had systematically robbed me while pretending to be my partner and friend. The next morning, I met with my attorney, Patricia Chen, to discuss dissolving the partnership. Patricia was in her mid-50s, sharp and pragmatic, with a reputation for handling complex business disputes efficiently. "Given the criminal charges, dissolution should be straightforward," Patricia said, reviewing our partnership agreement. "Your agreement includes a clause allowing either partner to dissolve the partnership for cause. Embezzlement definitely qualifies as cause. You'll need to buy out his 50% stake, but given his criminal liability, you have significant negotiating leverage." "What's his stake worth?" "Normally, 50% of a company grossing $4 million with consistent profitability would be worth somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million. But given his fraud, his criminal exposure, and his need to pay restitution, he's in no position to demand fair market value. I'd offer him $1. $1? Symbolic consideration. He stole nearly $900,000 from the company. He owes you restitution." His partnership stake is forfeit as a direct result of his criminal conduct. Offering $1 is generous under the circumstances. If he refuses, we can petition the court to dissolve the partnership and award you full ownership based on his breach of fiduciary duty. Won't his attorney fight that? Of course. But what's his argument? That Martin deserves to profit from a partnership he defrauded? No judge will accept that. Hammond will negotiate for a better exit, but he has almost no leverage. Martin needs money for legal fees and restitution. Selling his stake for whatever he can get is his best option. Patricia sent a formal dissolution proposal to Hammond that afternoon. The proposal offered Martin $1 for his 50% partnership stake, immediate termination of all partnership rights and obligations, and a release of any claims against the company or against me personally. In exchange, I would not pursue civil claims against Martin for the stolen funds beyond criminal restitution. Hammond responded 2 days later with a counter-proposal. Martin would sell his partnership stake for $300,000, payable immediately, with no admission of wrongdoing and complete mutual releases. $300,000, Patricia said when she called to discuss the counteroffer. He's delusional. He stole almost $900,000, faces federal prison, and wants you to pay him $300,000 to leave quietly? Tell me you want to reject this. Reject it, I said, and file the petition to dissolve the partnership judicially. Let a judge decide what Martin's fraud-tainted stake is worth. Patricia filed the petition the next morning. The hearing was scheduled for 4 weeks out, giving both sides time to prepare. In the meantime, I focused on running the company alone. I'd already notified our employees about Martin's departure, explaining only that he was no longer with the company and that I'd be managing operations directly. I didn't mention the fraud or the FBI investigation. That would come out soon enough. Our foreman and project managers were supportive but concerned. "Is the company stable?" asked Dave Reynolds, our senior foreman who'd been with us for 18 years. "Should we be worried about our jobs?" "The company is completely stable financially," I assured him. "This is a partnership issue, not a business issue. Your jobs are secure. Projects will continue without interruption. Nothing changes for any of you except I'm signing the checks now instead of Martin." 3 weeks after the FBI search warrants, Agent Torres called with an update. "We've completed our investigation. The U.S. Attorney is filing formal charges tomorrow. 8 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of mail fraud, 2 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of embezzlement. Maximum potential sentence is 90 years, though realistically, he's looking at 20 to 25 years if convicted on all counts." "Has Hammond indicated whether Martin will take a plea?" Hammond requested a meeting with the prosecutors. That usually means plea negotiations. We'll see what he proposes. But given the evidence, I doubt the U.S. Attorney will offer much of a reduction. The formal charges were filed the next day. Martin was arrested at his home, processed, and released on a $200,000 bond secured by his house. The local newspaper covered the story. Local businessman charged with embezzling nearly $900,000 from construction company. The article included Martin's mugshot and described him as co-owner of Brennan and Sullivan Construction, accused of creating fake vendors and stealing from his own company. My phone rang constantly for 2 days, clients wanting assurances their projects wouldn't be affected, suppliers asking if we were financially stable, competitors probably hoping we'd collapse so they could hire our crews. I spent hours on calls explaining the situation, assuring everyone the company was sound, and emphasizing this was Martin's crime, not a company-wide problem. The dissolution hearing was held in New Haven Superior Court on a Thursday morning in early December. I arrived with Patricia, carrying binders of evidence documenting Martin's fraud. Martin arrived with Hammond, looking 20 pounds lighter than he'd been 2 months ago, his face gray and drawn. Judge Richard Volpe presided, a man in his early 60s known for being impatient with nonsense and quick to cut through weak arguments. "I've reviewed the pleadings," Judge Volpe began. "Mr. Brennan seeks dissolution of the partnership based on Mr. Sullivan's criminal fraud. Mr. Sullivan opposes dissolution or, alternatively, seeks fair market value for his partnership stake. Mr. Hammond, explain why your client deserves anything given the federal charges pending against him." Hammond stood. "Your Honor, the criminal charges are just that. Charges. Mr. Sullivan maintains his innocence and looks forward to proving that at trial. Regarding the partnership, even assuming some impropriety occurred, Mr. Sullivan invested 25 years building this company. His stake has significant value that shouldn't be forfeited without due process. The FBI executed search warrants and found evidence your client kept detailed records of his fraud, Patricia countered. They found fake invoices, bank deposits, emails creating fake business entities. This isn't alleged impropriety, Your Honor. This is documented, systematic theft. Mr. Sullivan breached every fiduciary duty owed to his partner. He should forfeit his partnership stake completely. What's the company worth? Judge Volpe asked. Approximately $3 million based on assets and revenue, Patricia said. And Mr. Sullivan's stake? Ordinarily 50%, so $1.5 million. But given his breach of fiduciary duty, his criminal conduct, and the harm to the company's reputation, his stake is worth nothing. He should be expelled from the partnership with no compensation. That's absurd, Hammond protested. My client built this company alongside Mr. Brennan for 25 years. You can't simply take his ownership because of disputed financial irregularities. They're not disputed, I said, speaking for the first time. Martin kept a spreadsheet documenting his thefts. The FBI has it. Your client stole $893,000 from our company over 5 years. That's not disputed. That's proven. Judge Volpe looked at me. Mr. Brennan, you have documentation of these thefts. Yes, Your Honor, complete documentation. I kept duplicate records of all company transactions for 45 years. When I compared official records to my duplicates, I found hundreds of fraudulent invoices. I hired a forensic accountant who verified everything. The FBI investigation confirmed my findings. It's all documented. I'd like to see this documentation. Patricia handed the judge a binder containing Janet Morrison's forensic report, my analysis, copies of fraudulent invoices, bank records showing where the money went, and the FBI's search warrant affidavit detailing what they'd found. Judge Volpe spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents while we sat in silence. Finally, he looked up at Hammond. Your client created fake vendors, forged invoices, and deposited stolen money into accounts he controlled. He used that money for a luxury condo, a Porsche, and gambling. And he kept detailed records of his fraud on his computer. Mr. Hammond, what defense do you possibly have? The criminal case will address guilt or innocence, Your Honor. This proceeding is about partnership dissolution and valuation. This proceeding is about whether a partner who systematically defrauded his own company deserves to profit from that fraud, Judge Volpe interrupted. And the answer is no. Mr. Sullivan breached every fiduciary duty owed to his partner. His partnership stake is forfeit. I'm ordering immediate dissolution of Brennan and Sullivan Construction with full ownership transferred to Mr. Brennan for nominal consideration of $1. Mr. Sullivan's ownership is terminated effective immediately. Order will be entered today. Hammond started to object, but Judge Volpe cut him off. This is not debatable, Mr. Hammond. Your client stole from his partner. He doesn't get paid for that. We're done here. The hearing lasted 35 minutes. I walked out of the courthouse owning 100% of the company I'd built. Martin walked out with nothing. His 25 years as my partner had been erased by his 5 years of theft. Outside the courthouse, Martin approached me while Hammond was on his phone. Thomas, please. I need money for legal fees. I need money for restitution. Can't we work something out? I looked at my former friend, this man I'd trusted for 40 years, and felt nothing but cold finality. You stole nearly $900,000 from me, Martin. You lied to my face for 5 years. You betrayed our friendship and our partnership. And now you want me to give you money? Number. Whatever consequences you face, you earned them. I'll lose everything. My house, my retirement, my family's respect. Everything. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. Goodbye, Martin. I walked away and didn't look back. The plea negotiations between Hammond and the U.S. Attorney's Office continued for another month. Martin initially wanted to plead guilty to reduce charges with a sentence recommendation of 3 years. The prosecutors rejected that outright. The evidence was too strong, the amount stolen too large, the breach of trust too egregious. Eventually, they reached an agreement. Martin would plead guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of embezzlement. In exchange, the other charges would be dismissed. The prosecutors would recommend a sentence of 10 years federal prison with restitution of $893,000 plus interest. The judge would make the final sentencing decision, but both sides agreed 10 years was appropriate given the circumstances. Agent Torres called me when the plea agreement was finalized. Sullivan took the deal. He'll plead guilty next week. Sentencing is scheduled for 60 days after that. You'll have an opportunity to make a victim impact statement if you want. I want to, I said. I want the judge to understand what Martin did. Not just financially, but the 40 years of friendship he destroyed, the trust he betrayed. All of it. The plea hearing was held on a cold January morning. I sat in the gallery watching as Martin stood before Judge Catherine Morrison, a federal judge known for harsh sentences in fraud cases. Hammond stood beside Martin, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. Mr. Sullivan, you're pleading guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of embezzlement, correct? Judge Morrison asked. Yes, Your Honor, Martin said quietly. You understand you're facing up to 20 years in federal prison for these crimes? Yes, Your Honor. You created fake companies, forged invoices, and stole nearly $900,000 from your business partner of 25 years, who is also your best friend of 40 years. Is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor. Why did you do this? Martin hesitated. I had gambling debts, personal financial problems. I made terrible choices. You made deliberate choices to steal from someone who trusted you. This wasn't a single bad decision. This was systematic fraud over 5 years involving hundreds of separate criminal acts. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Yes, Your Honor. I'm deeply ashamed. Judge Morrison accepted the guilty plea and scheduled sentencing for March 15th, 60 days away. Martin would remain free on bond until then. As he left the courthouse, he looked at me one final time. I met his gaze without emotion, then turned away. The next 2 months passed slowly. I ran the company, completed projects, bid on new work, and tried to rebuild the reputation Martin's fraud had damaged. Most clients stayed loyal, understanding this was one man's crime, not a company-wide problem. A few clients left, concerned about stability. I accepted their decisions without argument. I spent evenings preparing my victim impact statement for sentencing. I wanted to tell the judge everything about 40 years of friendship, about building a company together, about the trust Martin had destroyed, about the personal betrayal that hurt more than the financial theft. Sentencing day arrived cold and clear. I drove to the federal courthouse in New Haven, went through security, and took a seat in the gallery. Martin sat at the defense table with Hammond, wearing a cheap suit and looking defeated. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Mitchell, presented the government's sentencing recommendation first. Your Honor, Martin Sullivan committed systematic fraud against his business partner over 5 years. He stole $893,000. He created fake companies, forged hundreds of invoices, and betrayed a 40-year friendship. The guidelines recommend 10 to 12 years. The government recommends 10 years as appropriate punishment. Hammond presented Martin's mitigation argument next, emphasizing his age, his lack of prior criminal record, his gambling addiction, his remorse. Mr. Sullivan is 66 years old, Your Honor. He's lost his business, his reputation, his friendships. He's deeply remorseful. A lengthy prison sentence would be unduly harsh. We asked the court to consider a sentence of 5 years. Then Judge Morrison looked at me. Mr. Brennan, you submitted a victim impact statement. Would you like to read it to the court? I stood and walked to the podium. I'd written 12 pages, but looking at Martin sitting at the defense table, I realized I didn't need 12 pages. Everything I needed to say could be said in 2 minutes. Your Honor, Martin Sullivan was my best friend for 40 years. We met as young men working construction. We built successful careers. We became partners. Our families were close. I trusted him completely. For 5 years, while smiling to my face and pretending to be my friend, Martin stole from me. He created fake companies. He forged invoices. He took nearly $900,000 and spent it on luxuries and gambling. The financial theft hurt, but what hurt more was the betrayal. Knowing that for 5 years, every time we had dinner together, every time we played golf, every time he told me our company was doing well, he was lying. Knowing that our 40-year friendship meant so little to him that he could steal from me without hesitation. I'm 68 years old. I've worked hard my entire life. I've tried to be honest, to treat people fairly, to keep my word. Martin taught me that none of that matters to some people, that friendship and trust mean nothing compared to money. I don't know what sentence is appropriate, Your Honor, but I know Martin made hundreds of deliberate choices to steal from me. This wasn't one mistake. This was years of calculated fraud, and I believe he should face significant consequences for those choices. Thank you. I sat down. Judge Morrison looked at Martin. Mr. Sullivan, do you have anything to say? Martin stood slowly. Your Honor, I'm deeply sorry for what I've done. I betrayed my best friend. I stole from him. I destroyed our friendship. I have no excuse. I made terrible choices driven by addiction and financial pressure. I wish I could undo it all. I'm truly sorry. Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. Mr. Sullivan, you committed a profound betrayal. You stole from your best friend and partner over 5 years. You showed no remorse until you were caught. Even now your apology feels empty because you only regret the consequences, not the choices. The guidelines recommend 10 to 12 years. Your attorney asks for 5. The government recommends 10. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison. You will serve a minimum of 85% of that sentence. You are ordered to pay restitution of $893,000 plus interest. You will have no contact with Mr. Brennan. You will surrender yourself to begin your sentence in 30 days. 12 years. Martin would be 78 years old when released. His life, as he'd known it, was over. Martin was led away in handcuffs. I watched him go, feeling nothing but closure. Justice had been served. The right thing had happened. Outside the courthouse, Agent Torres approached me. How do you feel? Complete, I said. The situation is resolved. That's it? Just complete? What else should I feel? Martin committed crimes. He was caught. He was punished. That's how the system works. I'm satisfied with that outcome. I drove home that afternoon, made dinner, and sat in my living room thinking about 40 years of friendship ended in a federal courtroom. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this, but a larger part of me knew this was inevitable the moment Martin made his first fraudulent invoice 5 years ago. He'd chosen his path. Now he'd walk it, and I'd walk mine, alone, but free. So far, after discovering Martin's $893,000 embezzlement through duplicate records, Thomas pursued criminal charges. The FBI found Martin's own spreadsheet documenting his fraud. A judge awarded Thomas 100% company ownership for $1, stripping Martin of his 25-year partnership stake. Martin pleaded guilty to wire fraud and embezzlement, receiving a 12-year federal prison sentence. Now, at age 68, Thomas must rebuild his company and his life after the ultimate betrayal of 40 years of friendship. Martin reported to federal prison 30 days after sentencing. He was sent to FCY Danbury, a medium-security facility in Connecticut about 90 miles from where I lived. I received a letter from the Bureau of Prisons notifying me of his location and inmate number, standard procedure for victims in federal cases. The letter included information about the restitution payment plan Martin would be required to follow. I put the letter in a file folder labeled Martin Sullivan Closed and didn't think about it again for months. The first few months after Martin's sentencing were focused entirely on stabilizing the company. I'd renamed it Brennan Construction, removing Martin's name completely. I met with every client personally, explaining the situation honestly but professionally. My former partner committed fraud. He's been prosecuted and convicted. The company is financially sound. Your projects will be completed on time and on budget. You have my personal guarantee. Most clients appreciated the directness. A few remained nervous and took their business elsewhere. I accepted their decisions without argument. Trust, once damaged, takes time to rebuild. I understood that better than anyone. I promoted Dave Reynolds, my senior foreman, to project manager. Dave was 52 years old, had worked in construction for 30 years, and understood the business as well as anyone. "Dave, I need someone I can trust completely," I told him when offering the promotion. "Someone who understands that integrity is more important than profit. Can you be that person?" "I can, Thomas," Dave said. "What happened with Martin shocked all of us, but we've seen how you handled it, with documentation and integrity. That's the kind of company I want to work for." With Dave managing projects, I focused on finances, client relationships, and bidding new work. The company was smaller without Martin, but more stable. Our overhead decreased, our profit margins improved. Within 6 months, we were back to consistent profitability. I also implemented new financial controls that should have existed all along. Dual signatures required for checks over $5,000, monthly reconciliations by an outside accountant, quarterly audits of all vendor relationships. No single person would ever again have the access Martin had used to steal from me. 8 months after Martin went to prison, I received my first restitution payment, $47.30. The federal prison system paid inmates roughly 12 cents per hour for work assignments. Martin was required to apply 25% of his prison earnings toward restitution. At his payment rate, it would take approximately 600 years to repay what he'd stolen. I deposited the check without comment. The money didn't matter. The principal did. Martin would spend the rest of his life owing me money he could never repay, just as I'd spent 5 years trusting a friend who'd never deserved it. Life settled into new routines. I worked during the day, came home to an empty house in the evenings, and tried to rebuild a life that had been defined by partnership and friendship for 40 years. It was harder than I'd expected, not because I missed Martin, but because I missed having someone to share the business with, someone to discuss projects with, to problem solve with, to celebrate successes with. But I'd learned the hard way that partnership requires trust, and trust requires integrity. Martin had neither, so I worked alone, and I accepted that as the cost of doing business with honest standards. A year after Martin's sentencing, I received a letter from him. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten on prison stationery. "Dear Thomas," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand that, but I'm writing because I need you to know how sorry I am. Not sorry I got caught, but genuinely sorry for what I did to you, to us, to 40 years of friendship. Prison gives you a lot of time to think. I've thought about every choice I made, every invoice I faked, every lie I told. I've thought about the moment I decided that money was more important than integrity. That moment destroyed everything I'd built, not just our partnership, my marriage, my relationship with my kids, my self-respect. All of it gone because I was too weak to stop gambling and too greedy to live within my means. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I did. I betrayed the best friend I ever had. I destroyed a partnership that was honest and successful, and I did it for luxuries I didn't need and gambling losses I couldn't afford. You always said construction taught you to measure twice and cut once, to be careful, thorough, precise. I forgot those principles, and now I'm paying for that mistake with 12 years of my life. I hope you're doing well. I hope the company is thriving. I hope you found peace after what I put you through. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved a partner you could trust. I'm sorry I wasn't that person. Martin." I read the letter twice, then filed it in the same folder with the prison notification. The apology felt genuine this time. Not the desperate plea of a man facing consequences, but the reflection of someone who'd actually understood what he'd lost. But understanding didn't change anything. Martin had made his choices. This was his consequence. His recognition of that fact didn't erase the betrayal or rebuild the trust. I didn't respond to the letter. There was nothing to say. 2 years after Martin went to prison, I was contacted by his ex-wife, Susan. She called my office on a Tuesday afternoon, and my secretary transferred the call before I could refuse it. "Thomas, this is Susan Sullivan. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. Martin had a heart attack last week. He's in the prison hospital. He's stable now, but it was serious. They thought he might not make it. I felt nothing hearing this news. No satisfaction, no concern. Just acknowledgement that Martin was 68 years old with a history of high blood pressure and poor health choices. Heart attacks happened. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it in the distant way you mean condolences for someone you once knew but no longer cared about. I hope he recovers. He asked me to call you. He wanted you to know. He said you were the best friend he ever had, and he destroyed that through his own greed and stupidity. Those were his exact words. Susan, I appreciate you calling, but Martin and I don't have a relationship anymore. What happened to him is unfortunate, but it's not my concern. I wish him well, but I'm not going to visit him or resume contact. That chapter of my life is closed. I understand. I just promised him I'd call. Thank you for listening. After hanging up, I sat at my desk thinking about Martin in a prison hospital, 68 years old, recovering from a heart attack with 10 more years of his sentence remaining. Part of me wondered if he'd even survive 12 years, but mostly I felt nothing except a vague sense of the inevitable. Actions have consequences. Martin's actions had led him exactly where he was. 3 years after the sentencing, Brennan Construction was thriving. We'd completed 2 major projects that year, a medical office building and a community center, both on time and under budget. Our reputation had recovered from Martin's fraud. Clients trusted us again. We were bidding on projects we'd never have qualified for when Martin was stealing from the company. I hired 2 new project managers, both younger men in their 40s with excellent reputations and strong references. I was careful during the hiring process, checking references thoroughly, running background checks, establishing clear expectations about integrity and documentation. This company operates on trust, I told them during their first week, but trust must be verified. We document everything. We reconcile accounts monthly. We audit vendor relationships quarterly. Not because I don't trust you, but because good systems prevent bad decisions. My former partner stole nearly $900,000 because I trusted him without verification. I won't make that mistake again. Both men understood. Good people don't object to accountability. Only people planning to abuse trust object to verification. At 69 years old, I was running a successful construction company, employing 28 people and grossing $3.2 million annually. Not as large as when Martin and I were partners, but more profitable and more stable. I'd proven I didn't need Martin to succeed. The company had thrived without him. 4 years after sentencing, I received another restitution payment, this time $112. Martin must have gotten a better work assignment that paid more. At this rate, he'd repay his debt in approximately 400 years instead of 600. Progress, I suppose. I was approaching 70 years old and starting to think about retirement. Not immediate retirement, but planning for it. The company needed succession planning. Dave Reynolds was excellent but didn't want ownership. He wanted to manage projects, not run a business. I started exploring options, selling to a larger firm, bringing in a younger partner with a clear buyout timeline, or gradually winding down operations over 5 years. Each option had advantages and disadvantages. But one thing was certain. If I brought in another partner, the partnership agreement would include controls Martin and I had never implemented. Dual signatures, regular audits, financial transparency requirements, limited access to accounts, everything necessary to prevent another Martin situation. Trust, but verify. That was my new philosophy. And if someone objected to verification, they weren't trustworthy. 5 years after Martin went to prison, I attended a construction industry conference in Boston. During a networking dinner, I met another contractor, a man named Robert Chen, who was about my age and had recently discovered his business partner had embezzled from their company. Robert was devastated, angry, and confused about what to do. "How did you handle it?" Robert asked when he learned about my situation with Martin. "Everyone says you documented everything perfectly and got justice. How did you know what to do?" "I kept duplicate records," I said. "For 45 years, I kept a second set of every important document. When I suspected fraud, I compared official records to my duplicates. The discrepancies were obvious. From there, I hired a forensic accountant, contacted the FBI, and let the legal system work. But weren't you angry? Didn't you want revenge? I wanted justice. Revenge is emotional. Justice is systematic. I documented the fraud, proved it conclusively, and let appropriate authorities prosecute. That's not revenge. That's accountability. How do you deal with the betrayal? The loss of friendship? By understanding that the friendship ended the moment he started stealing, not the moment I discovered it. Martin destroyed our relationship through his choices. I just acknowledged what he'd already done. Robert nodded slowly. I keep thinking about all the years we were friends, all the times we helped each other, all the trust I gave him. How could he throw that away? Because some people value money more than integrity. Because addiction clouds judgment. Because greed makes people rationalize terrible choices. The why doesn't really matter. What matters is how you respond. You document everything. You prove the fraud. You pursue justice, and you move on. You don't let someone else's betrayal define your life. We talked for another hour about fraud prevention, documentation systems, and rebuilding after betrayal. When we parted, Robert shook my hand firmly. Thank you. You've given me a path forward. I thought I was alone in this. You're not alone. Fraud happens more often than people realize. The difference is whether you have documentation to prove it. That's why I tell everyone, keep duplicate records, trust but verify. Document everything. 6 years after Martin went to prison, I turned 71 years old. I decided to sell Brennan Construction to a regional firm that appreciated our reputation and wanted to retain our employees. The sale price was fair, the terms were reasonable, and the buyer committed to keeping our staff employed for at least 3 years. Dave Reynolds would continue as project manager under the new ownership. Our other employees would have job security and opportunities for advancement. I'd receive a lump sum payment and a consulting fee for 2 years to help with the transition. The day we signed the sale agreement, Dave pulled me aside. Thomas, I've worked for you for 23 years. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for running an honest company. Thank you for handling the Martin situation with integrity. Thank you for proving that good people can win. Good systems win, Dave. Good people plus good systems equal honest outcomes. I failed with Martin because I trusted without verifying. I succeeded after him because I implemented proper controls. That's the lesson. Not that people are good or bad, but that systems prevent bad choices. Still, you could have given up after what Martin did. You could have closed the company, retired early, walked away bitter. Instead, you rebuilt. You proved the company was valuable without him. That took courage. It took documentation, I said with a slight smile. Courage is emotional. Documentation is methodical. I prefer methodical. I retired officially on my 71st birthday. The company sale closed, employees transitioned to new ownership, and I walked out of the office I'd worked in for 35 years. I felt lighter than I'd felt in decades. No more worrying about payroll, about project deadlines, about client relationships. Just freedom to do whatever I wanted with whatever time I had left. 7 years after Martin went to prison, I received a call from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Martin had suffered another heart attack. This one had been fatal. He was 69 years old. He'd served 7 years of his 12-year sentence. He died in the prison hospital with 5 years remaining on his sentence and $893,000 in unpaid restitution. The prison official asked if I wanted to claim his personal effects. I declined. I had no use for anything Martin had owned. Susan called 2 days later to tell me about Martin's funeral. It would be small, just family, at a funeral home in Martin's hometown. I know you probably won't want to come, but I wanted to tell you anyway, Susan said. You're right. I won't be attending, but thank you for letting me know. Thomas, can I ask you something? Do you hate Martin for what he did? No, I said honestly. I don't hate him. I don't feel anything about him anymore. He made choices that destroyed our friendship and his own life. I responded appropriately. That's all. That's very cold. It's very clear. Martin and I aren't friends anymore because of Martin's choices, not mine. His death doesn't change that. I'm sorry for your loss, Susan. but it's not my loss. That loss happened 7 years ago when I discovered his fraud. I didn't attend Martin's funeral. I spent that day at home, reading, working in my garden, living my life. Martin's death felt like the closing of a parenthesis that had opened 7 years earlier when I'd confronted him about the stolen money. Looking back on everything that happened, I learned several fundamental truths about business, trust, and integrity. First, trust must be verified. I trusted Martin for 40 years and 25 years as partners. That trust was misplaced. If I'd implemented proper controls, dual signatures, regular audits, I would have discovered his fraud much sooner. Trust is necessary in relationships and partnerships, but blind trust is dangerous. Verified document. Audit. Those systems protect both honest people and relationships. Second, documentation is power. My duplicate records were the foundation of everything that followed. Without them, Martin could have claimed the fake invoices were legitimate, that I was confused, that my memory was failing. But I had paper proof of every transaction, every payment, every discrepancy. That documentation gave me legal power, moral authority, and strategic advantage. In construction, in business, in life, document everything. Third, betrayal reveals character. It doesn't create it. Martin didn't become a thief when he created his first fake invoice. He'd always been capable of theft. The right circumstances just revealed what was already there. His gambling addiction, his financial pressures, his desire for luxury all exposed his willingness to betray trust for money. The betrayal told me who Martin really was, who he'd perhaps always been underneath the friendship. Fourth, justice is sufficient. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Martin to suffer beyond legal consequences. I needed accountability. The legal system provided that. Martin was prosecuted, convicted, imprisoned, and ordered to pay restitution. That was enough. Anything more would have been petty. Anything less would have been inadequate. Justice was exactly right. Fifth, integrity outlasts partnership. When Martin and I started our partnership in 2000, we shook hands and promised to be honest with each other. I kept that promise for 25 years. Martin broke it within a few years. When the partnership dissolved, my integrity remained intact. His was destroyed. That difference mattered more than any financial outcome. At 71 years old, living alone, retired, financially secure, I look back on 40 years of friendship with Martin and feel no regret about how I handled his betrayal. I documented thoroughly. I pursued justice systematically. I rebuilt my company and my life without him. I proved I didn't need a dishonest partner to succeed. If you're facing similar betrayal, if you've discovered fraud from someone you trusted, if you're questioning whether blood or friendship obligates forgiveness, remember this. Loyalty is earned through consistent integrity, not granted through titles or history. You owe nothing to people who betray your trust. Document everything. Gather evidence methodically. Consult with professionals. Pursue legal justice. Don't let emotion cloud strategy. And understand that the person who betrayed you ended the relationship, not you. You're just acknowledging what they already did. I spent 45 years in construction learning that measurement matters, documentation saves projects, and cutting corners costs money. Those same principles apply to relationships. Measure trust through actions. Document important agreements. Don't cut corners on integrity. Martin forgot those principles. He cut corners, avoided documentation, and measured success by money rather than integrity. That approach failed in construction. It failed in partnership. It failed in life. I remembered those principles. I documented everything, verified trust, and measured success by integrity. That approach succeeded in construction. It succeeded in justice. It succeeded in life. The difference between us wasn't intelligence or opportunity or luck. It was character. And character, once revealed, tells you everything you need to know about whether someone deserves trust. Martin didn't deserve my trust. I gave it anyway for 40 years. When I discovered his betrayal, I revoked it permanently. That was the right decision. The only decision. Some people say forgiveness means letting go of anger. I never had anger. I had disappointment, clarity, and determination. I let go of Martin not because I forgave him, but because he wasn't worth carrying. He'd made himself irrelevant through his choices. Today, at 71, I wake up in a house I own, with money I earned honestly, and a reputation I built through integrity. Martin died in prison at 69 with nothing except unpaid debts and destroyed relationships. That difference wasn't an accident. It was the inevitable result of different choices made over decades. Construction taught me that foundations matter. A building with a weak foundation will eventually fail, no matter how beautiful the structure. The same is true for relationships, partnerships, and lives. Martin's foundation was greed and deception. My foundation was documentation and integrity. His building collapsed, mine still stands, and that's the only ending that matters. Not revenge, not forgiveness, not even justice, though justice matters. What matters is that integrity wins. Maybe not immediately, maybe not obviously, but eventually, always, integrity wins. Martin taught me that lesson by losing everything. I learned it by keeping my principles even when they cost me a friendship. 45 years in construction, 40 years of friendship betrayed, 7 years watching justice work, and now retirement earned through honest work. I sleep well at night. Martin died in prison. That's not cruelty, that's consequence, and that's exactly how it should be.